Good afternoon, members of the media, fellow Tobagonians, and citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, both at home and abroad. I thank you for joining us at today's press conference. I am Kate Trotman, the Vice Chairman of the IDA, but today I stand before you in another capacity as well, because at this time it is demanded. I also stand before you as the Shadow Minister to the Tobago parliamentarians. Today, I am joined by the political leader of the IDA, but today she's also standing in the capacity as the former chairman of the TRHA and a former chairman of the commissioning committee of the then new Scarborough General Hospital. You know, when those elected to speak for us fall silent, someone must step forward to hold the space. Someone must speak for the people of Tobago. Today, the idea stands before the nation because someone has to. Tobago has been too quiet for too long about things that matter deeply to our future. The question today is in response to the Prime Minister and the claims by the Venezuelan President Maduro and the resulting impasse that seems to exist between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela. And I ask the question, where's the response from the Chief Secretary, the Tobago parliamentarians, the minority leader, on this matter that so clearly has the impact or has the possibility of impacting Tobago's interest if it doesn't threaten it? And make no mistake, this is not just a political failure. This is a moral one. A moral one because we are hearing silence, a silence that is deafening. And this is absolutely unacceptable. We are part of a twin island republic. And let's be very clear, Tobago is half of this nation. The matters that directly affect our people, our safety, our economy, our dignity, we must exercise our voice. Silence cannot be our default response when national decisions put Tobago and Tobagonians at risk. And let me tell you, the declaration by the Prime Minister that created this impasse does put Tobago at risk. To publicly align Trinidad and Tobago with the US, especially in the context of the aggressive posture taken by the Trump administration towards Venezuela, is a radical departure from our country's long-standing foreign policy of non-alignment. This is not a misstep. This is a redirection of our national identity on the global stage, made without debate, without consensus, and without the constitutional check that should guide such a consequential shift. Let us consider the local impact. The impact on our fisherfolk, tourism, and migration pressures. The Tobago economy is hanging on by threads, not fully recovered from the COVID pandemic. Fishing, a significant lifeline to many, and yet our Prime Minister chooses this moment to declare she's fully aligned with the US government's hardline stance against our closest neighbor, Venezuela. What does that mean for Tobago? It means our fisherfolk, some of whom sail into waters close to the Venezuelan border to get their catch, are now under greater threat. And this is not just about policy. It is about people. It is about fathers, brothers, sons, even women on boats doing what they must to bring home food and catch. And now they have been put in harm's way because of a statement made. Brash, brazen, and without thought. And let us not forget tourism, another lifeline to many Tobagonians. Tourists will not come to a place that is wrapped up in diplomatic confusion. They want peace, safety, serenity. The Prime Minister's speech threatens all of this. And the migrant crisis. This is likely to worsen due to increased hardship in Venezuela because of the continued aggressive US policies. We note that the Prime Minister's words can invite the wrong reaction from Venezuela. And it is we here in Tobago, with our strained education and health services and housing infrastructure, that will feel the fallout first. Now, I don't want you to get me wrong. The leader of the country, for this leader, it is imperative that all potential threats be taken seriously and that appropriate courses of action be pursued. However, in this particular situation, we question whether the displayed bluster, this initial display, was warranted when there are other diplomatic avenues available. And this especially given the nuanced geopolitical and economic climate we find ourselves in. Our declared alignment to the US and its hawkish policies towards Venezuela, and any country doing business with it, is indeed an area of concern that requires skillful balancing. Let's note the tariff war on China, who engages in significant trade with Venezuela and who is also a trading partner of this country. Even the country's potential offshore energy ventures like gas importation from Guyana and Suriname require transit through Venezuelan waters, which necessitates safe and stable relations. It is under these circumstances that we must fully grasp the breadth of the impact of the Prime Minister's declaration. The national impact we can categorize as executive overreach and constitutional urgency. The Prime Minister did not consult us, and some may say she didn't need to. But she did not even consult Parliament. No debate, no deliberation, just declaration. Executive power flexed. This is governance by dictate, not by dialogue. And that is precisely why this nation is in need of urgent constitutional reform. We cannot continue with a system that gives any one Prime Minister the unchecked power to gamble with our international relationships, our economy, and our sovereignty. And don't be fooled. There was no imminent threat that justified the Prime Minister's statement to pursue deadly force on unidentified vessels in the waters of our country. This being the initial response is very questionable. There is a Venezuelan embassy in the country through which initial diplomatic talks could have been initiated and burden of proof established, especially when our defense minister confirms the existence of gaps in our radar detection system that does not allow us to categorically see the claims of the Venezuelan president is without merit. Let me say it plain, and I doubt I can say it plainer than this. It is this same kind of executive overreach that made people feel left out and powerless under the Keith Rowley administration. And that is why Tobagonians and Trinidadians sent the PNM packing. The regional impact we see that we may be repeating history that we should have learned from. And I want to direct this especially to our young people who may be trying to make sense of all of this. In 1983, a Caribbean leader named Dame Eugenia Charles, Prime Minister of Dominica, the Iron Lady of the Caribbean, she championed the US invasion of Grenada after its Prime Minister, Maurice Bishop, was executed. She stood with US President Ronald Reagan to send soldiers into another CARICOM nation. This led to bloodshed, to mistrust, and to division in the region. And although it was felt that there was a legal and moral justification, the action was denounced by many countries, and the UN General Assembly condemned it as a flagrant violation of international law. Today, we risk echoing similar situation by aligning blindly. What we need is maturity, level-headedness that will embrace regional cooperation and diplomacy to ensure peace in the region. If we consider the international impact, we can surmise wrong move, no leverage. The US will not secure our maritime borders. They will not intercept boats or manage migration. They will not even save our dragon gas deal, which is already dead except for a divine intervention of God to change our fortune. So then, what are the benefits from this kind of alignment? Is there any? Not for us, not for Tobago, not for this nation. So then I ask, why are we risking it all with this move? The IDA's call to action is to restore Tobago's voice in this matter. That is why the IDA won't shirk our responsibility. When others go quiet, we will speak. When others turn away, we will face the people. Our representatives have a duty to speak for Tobago, and that duty cannot be delegated, it cannot be denied, nor can it be delayed. While the Prime Minister can speak for Trinidad and Tobago, Tobago must not and cannot remain silent when the Prime Minister's declaration carries dangerous and immediate consequences for Tobago. We are therefore calling for the following: a public statement from the Chief Secretary and the parliamentary representatives for Tobago. Clarify your position on this impasse or admit that you have failed to represent us. We are calling for a joint sitting of the THA to address Tobago's role in contributing to shaping foreign policy. We are calling for a constitutional amendment process to ensure that no Prime Minister ever again can unilaterally reshape our foreign affairs posture. And we are calling for a national reaffirmation of non-alignment. That has been our known stance. Peace is our legacy, and diplomacy is the way to avoid war. It is in our interest not to be caught up in geopolitical maneuverings, but to act on the foundation of international principles of respect for the sovereignty of nations, the non-interference in internal affairs of another state. You know, on a national level, we find merit in the position put forward by the MSG, that of sending a special envoy to Caracas to ascertain the facts of the situation of this impasse, and especially since current diplomatic efforts have not yielded fruits to date. Fellow citizens, this is not about politics. And let me say it again, it is not about politics. It is about principle. It is about people. This is about protecting Tobago, our island, our families, our economy, our future. But it is also about protecting our nation, the nation of Trinidad and Tobago. Tobago is not a province. It is not an outpost. Tobago is half of this nation of Trinidad and Tobago. And this half must be heard on this situation. If our leaders won't speak for us, know that the idea will. Because we believe that we were created for this very moment. And I want to say to us in Tobago, that Tobago, this situation has also created our moment that we need to step into and allow our voice and our opinions to be heard. I thank you, and I now leave the floor open for any questions that the media may have. Okay, so we can move right along. And I want to call to address you, Dr. Denise Sawyerfat Angus, as we continue the discourse on Tobago's health sector and the crisis therein. But as I said, today she is going to lean heavily on her capacity as former chair of the TRHA, as well as former chairman of the commissioning committee of the then New Scarborough Hospital. Dr. Sawyerfat.
Let me say a pleasant good afternoon to everyone who are viewing and listening audience, and special thank you to the media who came out today under these weather conditions to give us the platform so we can speak to the general public. Let me first congratulate Kate Rotman for that very clinical assessment of Tobago's response and what it should be regarding the Prime Minister's statements, and the glaring fact that all of our leaders who say they're speaking for Tobago have been silent on the issue. From the Chief Secretary to our two Tobago representatives in Parliament to our minority leader, they have all been silent on the issue. And therefore, thanks to Kate Rotman, who spoke up on behalf of the IDA regarding this. And so my role is to really talk about the health sector today. And so when the ambulance doesn't come, or it's not safe, it's not a scandal, it's a funeral. I have stood inside of our emergency rooms. I've chaired the Tobago Regional Health Authority, otherwise known as the TRHA. I'm here today not as a politician, but as a woman of faith, a medical doctor, and a daughter of Tobago who cannot stay silent while this island bleeds from the inside out. This isn't about paperwork or politics. It's about whether the ambulance shows up when your child can't breathe or your mother collapses. This speech isn't just critique. It's a call to action to fix the system now. Let us call it what it is: a collapse of trust, a betrayal of duty, and a danger to every Tobagonian. Today, I stand on behalf of the IDA to demand action, not for likes, but for lives. So what exactly went wrong? In 2023, the TRHA rejected a recommendation to spend about $300,000 to repair 5 ambulances, 5. Instead, they chose to lease ambulances from Trinidad at about $3,500 per day per vehicle. So when we do the maths from then until now, by July, which is next month, we would have spent about $8.4 million on that exercise. And so we're adding that to the fact that, back in 2023, it was shown that $5 million was to be spent on ambulances, but somehow we got up to $17 million by 2025. And so when you add those, it's about $25.8 million we're treating with for this whole ambulance situation. But you're spending $17 million for the procurement. 12 vehicles were promised, but as of now, only 1 functional here on the island. And we are told that there are 3 others still being worked on in Trinidad, and the rest, God alone knows what's happening to them. Worse yet, the Secretary of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, who under the THA Act is duty-bound to approve the budget, monitor spending, and oversee the performance timelines of the TRHA in keeping with THA policies, she has publicly said she had nothing to do with it, not her responsibility. And this is even more striking since it contradicts the principles previously championed by her boss in his capacity as the minority years ago, where he insisted that the secretaries must be responsible for their divisions and for everything that occurs within. So today, I remind the secretary, you cannot wear the crown when the cameras are coming, and you want to dodge the crown when questions are coming. It is also harsh that in today's world, such severe climates that we are going through, that these 12 ambulances have no air conditioning, no AC, but the previous ambulances had AC. They have also gone from automatic driving ambulances to now stick shift. Imagine the occupational injuries that these emergency medical technicians will have because you're using stick shift on all of these heavy vehicles to go up the hill, down the hill, and around the corners in Tobago. Think about that. In addition to a non-locking stretcher that is a hazard to both patient and staff, and one that is now manual and not really hydraulic of modern standards, I am told that the weight capacity has gone from 600 pounds down to about 280 pounds. Now, let's look at that. That means that if you are a 200-pound patient, and it's not that hard to get to a 200-pound patient, that is probably what our average we're dealing with. Yeah, given height, and all of that, £200 may not be that much. You have a £200 patient and a £180 EMT because somebody had to travel in the thing with them, in the back with them, plus the drivers. When you add up, you're way over the £280. And apparently that is what triggered the stalling of one of them on that hill, because it was way over the £280 and the ambulance could not have taken it. That is quite a limitation. Does that mean that before you go and pick up the patient, you have to call and ask how much they weigh? That's not international standards. We could do better than that. In a recent press conference with the chairman and CEO, it was really laughable but appalling, since this is really life and death we are dealing with. And to hear their justifications for this procurement fiasco, that they actually went to a regular car dealership to attempt to procure ambulances. Where is the medical advisor on the board and the users to tell them that doing something like that was ludicrous? And it truly demonstrates the real crisis that we are dealing with in this health sector, even more so. After that press conference, I shook my head and I said, no wonder the health sector is in such crisis. Life and death. You go into a car dealership to get a specialized piece of medical equipment, because that's what an ambulance is. It's not a van, it's a specialized piece of medical equipment as the first line for saving lives, taking people from wherever and transporting them to the hospital. I mean, if we continue like that, just now you're going to tell the patient, go in the mechanic shop for a checkup. This is not the first time ambulances have been procured at the TRHA. What happened to all the previous processes that occurred? What happened to all the previous suppliers? What happened, to all of them who have tendered in the past and who were deemed experienced in that endeavor? These are serious questions that must be answered. The people of Tobago deserve answers, and not a press conference in a failed attempt to pull wool over our eyes. Nevertheless, the IDA has completed a review of the TRHA's press conference and their own admission of the flaws in the ambulance procurement process. From their reports, we have identified that there were clear breaches in procedure, poor judgment in supplier selection, and a worrying pattern of defensiveness from the leadership. Those in public offices must understand that this is not a personal attack. It is a commitment to integrity. And so what we found in our analysis was quite troubling. As we said before, the TRHA approached car dealerships for medically certified ambulances, a deviation from the past and from international best practice. They said there were offers to convert maxis into ambulances, and they were actually seriously considering it. Really? I mean, the board even defended it by saying an ambulance is a vehicle, a statement that reduces critical care infrastructure to a metal shell. They made mistakes like brand names left in tenders due to copy and paste errors, which undermine public confidence. Emergency procurement was executed without the transparency Tobagonians deserve. Legal threats were issued instead of open answers. Journalists were scolded for asking questions. The public was seen not as partners in governance, but as an audience to manage. And last of all, they defended actually been the board, from since April the 17th. But if you're the board from April the 17th, do the staff members know that you're in place? Have you had board meetings? And putting that the THA created a steering committee from January to April 17th. That steering committee only has the responsibility and the authority to advise the secretary and the administrator, and not to actually operate or instruct the TRHA or sign any documents. They don't have that legal grounds to do any of that. Okay? So that period is still under question. If anything was signed by anybody who was purporting themselves to be on the board, that would definitely have to be invalidated. And so the TRHA's leadership appears to treat public communication as damage control rather than a tool of democratic accountability. The framing of questions as mischief, the slow responses to inquiries, and the resort to litigation over conversation suggest they underestimate the public's right to demand transparency. They're underestimating your rights. They're overestimating their ability to manage perception because they didn't pull wool over our eyes. And they're operating in a top-down culture rather than community-centered governance that could get us further on our trajectory to progress and better quality of care. The worst part of it is when they said they got a 3-year warranty and can return the ambulances at any time. Now, I want to ask you, members of the public, think about it. You bought a fridge. You went and you buy the fridge, they bought the fridge, they put it in the house for you, and you open the fridge, there are no drawers, there are no shelves, and when you plug it in, it's not cooling properly. But you say, you still try, and you start to load up in the fridge with a few items, not as much as your old fridge had, but you load it up, and when you load it up, the fridge starts to topple and tilt. You call the company, and they send someone to install the shelves, but it's still tipping over, it's still not cooling properly, problems all along, and then you start to notice little chips, coming off your new fridge, as if it's something they refurbished. Let me ask you, what would you do? Would you not take it back and ask for your money back? Or are you waiting for 3 years to go by to then take it back and say it under warranty? And I want you to take off your political hat and answer that question honestly. What would you do? Not go back and get your money. The idea believes public leadership must be humble, accountable, and data-driven, not defensive or dismissive. The Tobago public deserves full transparency, clear documentation, and an apology where institutions fall short. We are therefore calling on the board to do the right thing and return the ambulances. The THA to think before spending. If Tobago had a medical tourism project or plan in development, would those be the ambulances purchased to support that vision? I'd rather doubt it. The ambulance without an AC, manual stretcher, limited load, what kind of medical tourism you're running with that support system? No. So stop treating Tobagonians like second-class citizens in our own island. Start planning for income generating development that uplifts the quality of care and guarantees sustainability. We are here to serve, not to spin. The future of Tobago's health system must be grounded in trust and not transactions. To our Tobago parliamentarians, your people need you now. Today, I am making a direct appeal to Honorable Joel Sampson and Honorable David Thomas, Tobago's newly elected members of parliament. You said you would remain outside the cabinet so you could be Tobago's moral voice in parliament. That moment is now. That voice is needed, loud, clear, and uncompromised. The IDA has submitted an electronic draft of a motion with a cover letter to the two parliamentarians, calling for them to move the motion in Parliament to activate the Joint Select Committee so the country can get answers. This letter was sent to the clerk of the House since we are still yet to know how to reach our Tobago representatives. There's no contact on the website, nothing for them yet. So we sent it to the clerk of the House and asked them to submit it to them. Let me now read for you what was sent to them so all of Tobago knows exactly where we stand and what actions we are calling for. So we said, dear honorable members, you were elected by the people of Tobago to be our voice, not just in presence, but in principle. From the outset, both of you made bold and commendable stands, choosing not to serve in cabinet so that you would maintain an unfettered voice in parliament. That position was not simply political, it was moral. And it is now time for the moral voice to speak on behalf of a Tobago in crisis. The current state of Tobago's health sector, evidenced by 25.8 million ambulance fiasco, questionable incinerator procurement, and mounting governance failures within the Tobago Regional Health Authority, has left Tobagonians exposed, disillusioned, and in danger. This is not merely administrative mismanagement. This is a matter of life and death. Under Section 66A to 66D of the Constitution, Parliament has the authority to appoint a joint select committee to monitor and evaluate ministries, statutory bodies, and state enterprises. We are therefore calling on you to move a motion for the activation of the Joint Select Committee on local authorities and service commissions to urgently investigate the breakdowns in oversight, legal compliance, and procurement practices at the TRHA. This is your moment of leverage. The nation is watching. Tobago is watching. We urge you to negotiate for position. We urge you to negotiate not for position, but for protection for the people, for patients, and for public health. Let history remember that when Tobago's health system flatlined, our parliamentarians revived it with action, not silence. We have attached a draft motion for your urgent consideration. Respectfully, political leader of the IDA. And so this is what we would have sent to them. We also sent a similar letter to the opposition senator for Tobago, Senator Melanie Roberts-Rajman. We sent her one also asking them to intercede. So I'm not going to go through the motion that was sent, but I will submit it to the media so that they can utilize it. People, this is more than politics. You know, someone messaged me just last week and said, I know during your time as chair, this could have never happened. It would have never happened. And I had to agree. During my tenure as the TRHA chairman, ambulance procurement was guided by structured, medically led, and user assessment protocols. We have done it before. Tobago deserves no less today. While some shout for resignations and others hide in silence, the idea stands firm, offering audits, reform, transparency, and real solutions. Tobago doesn't need noise or neglect. It needs leadership, and that's what we bring. You know, this is really about the grandmother in Mason Hall who, despite finally getting through to the emergency services, was transported in a vehicle with no air conditioning, no family, because they were told the combined weight will be over 280 pounds. This is about a sick child in Charlottesville that they couldn't even reach because the ambulance oversized and can't manage the terrain. That is the reality of what we are fighting to change. So let us work together to build something better. We do not rise by protecting positions. We rise by protecting our people and their rights. Tobago deserves a health system that responds, a leadership that takes responsibility, and a governance structure that works not for itself but for us. The idea is ready to lead that change, and we are ready to stand in the gap. Let us speak truth. Let us act boldly. Let us rescue Tobago before another life is lost and before another dollar is wasted. Because when the ambulance doesn't come or is not safe, it's not a scandal, it's a funeral. So I pause here to ask if there are any questions. No? Okay. So I want to speak about another issue. Initially, we didn't have it on the books before we sent out our, advisory as to what we're going to speak on. But it is a very serious problem to us. You know, the idea expresses grave concerns over the Finance Secretary's public statement that the THA had to withdraw its request from central government for additional funds, citing that the government had no money. This retreat raises far more questions than answers and reveals a dangerous blend of political calculation and fiscal capitulation. Let's be real. Did this same THA leadership in the last general election boldly campaign on a promise that Tobago will receive more than it was getting, 5% under the incoming central government? But what we are now seeing is a less courage, less advocacy, and less transparency in us getting our 5%. Would this THA have pulled back under the former administration? We doubt it. And if that is the case, we must ask, was this about money in the pullback or about politics? Is it that the funds were not truly needed after all, or that the THA fell short in justifying the need for it? And if Tobago's financial ask was so vital, then what exactly was the 5-hour meeting between the Prime Minister and the Chief Secretary about if days later the very request is retracted without a whimper? People are calling the idea from across Tobago, asking, why did THA pull back the request? Why they pull it back? And how are they going to fund the outstanding debts, including the overdue rent payment to homeowners who support their social emergency rent program for people who need it? You know, the people who are displaced and they put them there, yeah, they're owing a lot of money to them. You know, I met a contractor in Scarborough who lamented the fact that they still have not been paid for the last 4 years by this THA. Persons are also complaining that the cataract surgery, I believe, the program is affected by non-payment to the staff, and therefore it's resulting in no surgeries. And just this week, of course, the carnival participants from across Tobago are also voicing their frustration that they still have not been paid. This isn't a single lapse, it's a pattern of delay, denial, and disrespect. Young people are disappointed because they were promised jobs for election and nothing has materialized. Not budgeting, bluffing. And the people of Tobago are the ones paying for the political theater. Right beside the back pay, Tobagonians voted for 5% in the budget. Now, THA asked for 5.1%, but pulled back to submit for 4.35% after being instructed by the minister in meetings in Trinidad. The gap between 4.35 and 5.1, the THA is now demanding, is not a maths problem. It's a governance test. That difference represents the line between fragile service delivery and a robust development. And for a THA that claims to fight for Tobago, this kind of retreat signals weakness, not wisdom. But there is a deeper procedural question. If the budget has to be first passed in the legislature before going to the parliament in Trinidad to be debated, should a variation to the budget now go directly to parliament without having a legislative debate? I hope we could hear from the minority on this issue. Under an IDA-led THA, budget negotiations would not be reduced to political theater. Our approach is rooted in planning, not pleading, grounded in a 10-year fiscal vision aligned with Tobago's development priorities. Over the past 4 years, we expected to see a development plan created by this THA to demonstrate how Tobago can begin to grow its economy similarly to other Caribbean islands that are flourishing, other islands that like St. Kitts and Nevis, smaller than us, but flourishing. Without a plan to show how we can contribute to alleviating the economic challenges across the country, no one will be taking us seriously. That is why the IDA commits to publishing a publicly available fiscal roadmap within the first 100 days of leadership, linking sectorial priorities, measurable outcomes, and phased investment targets that also includes our communities as part of the arm of development. Tobago must show, not just tell. We must show our intent to build a self-reliant, innovation-led community. This isn't theoretical for us. When I chaired the TRHA, and even as Secretary of Community Development and Culture and as presiding officer, working with persons in the different areas, we would strategically prioritize our meager resources, because I had to say meager, because what they're getting now, we never got done it. And we implemented structured, results-based plans that earned cross-party support and delivered tangible outcomes, including turning around the TRHA from operating in a very red area to achieving savings. That's the same energy the IDA brings. Tested leadership with a track record of getting things done. Whether the central government wears red or yellow, Tobago's voice must be principled. Any THA administration should not be negotiating for handouts. They should be advocating for our people with clarity, courage, and accountability. Pulling back a credible budget will not be acceptable. Unless, of course, the budget was so poorly designed, lacking developmental goals, clear deliverables, or timelines that could inspire confidence. And therefore, it had no choice but to be pulled back. In either case, this administration continues to fail us. They have failed the people of Tobago. This isn't governance, it's retreat. This isn't transparency, it's silence. And this TPP administration is failing us. Tobago deserves better, and the IDA is ready to lead that change. We therefore call for a formal statement by the Chief Secretary within the next 7 days, explaining whether this pullback is a signal of deeper breakdowns in Tobago's fiscal management or cracks in the newly minted relationship with central government. We are calling for an independent review of the THA's fiscal strategy to ensure future negotiations are evidence-based, transparent, and rooted in the island's true developmental priorities. We're calling for a legislative tabling of an annual fiscal readiness scorecard for Tobago with bipartisan oversight to track progress and signal gaps. And lastly, we are calling for a special sitting of the House to approve the request that this THA is wanting to send for the midterm review. The people have a right to know what is being requested and for what. That is what our legislature is there for. If you had to approve the original budget to go in, if there is now a variation to it, it needs to pass through the legislature. Tobago deserves leadership that understands both numbers and negotiations. The IDA will continue to hold all parties to account, not to play politics, but to protect the people's purse. Tobago, it's time for us to wake up and know these leaders work for us. And I want you to call the Chief Secretary, if he would answer his phone, and demand answers. Let's call it the Real Talk Tobago campaign. Because only through truth and accountability can we move forward together. Call and demand answers. And to all Tobagonians, again, I'm suggesting you ask the question, even on your social media pages, let them answer. Why did the THA pull back the budget request if the needs were considered urgent in the first place? What changed after 5 hours of meeting with the Prime Minister in Trinidad? Let's make sure the answers come back to the people. Okay, so any questions? No questions? Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. And I look forward to continuing this conversation, advocating on behalf of the people of Tobago. Thank you.